Welcome to the State of JavaScript survey release stream. It's a mouthful every time, but I am so excited to be hosting tonight with my co-host, Kathryn. Woo, I did it.
You did it in the right direction.
And it is evening time for us, but it's actually morning time for our host, our guest of honor, I should say, Sacha. Sacha, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm still waking up, but hopefully I'll manage today.
So we are here today to celebrate the release of the 2022 JavaScript survey, talk about the vibe in the community, what's going on, and what we foresee in 2023. But we have a rock star panel to get to that I want to bring on. Before we do, Sacha, is there any we're going to link to it actually in the chat. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the stream. We're going to link to the survey results in the chat, and then Kathryn's showing you right there. And there's actually quite a few really cool features that were added to the State of JavaScript survey. So I'm really excited to get to those. But yes, any opening comments you'd like to say before we bring everybody on?
I guess apologize for releasing it in 2023 instead of 2022.
It was on the line, you know. It's like,
yeah,
it was right there.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be sure to include the data from December 31st at 11:59 p.m. So there was no way around it.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's go ahead and bring on some guests. I think first up is Tracy Lee. Welcome to the stage.
Hi. Good
How
to see everyone. Good. Happy evening. Good morning, Sacha.
Hey, thanks.
I am shuffling us all around. So Tracy, can you do a quick introduction for those in the JavaScript community? And we actually have a broad community of like .NETers and other like type of developers. So can you introduce yourself for those who might not have met you?
Sure. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. No, I have not left yet, so I'm still hanging out. So if you're lonely, come hang out. I am the co-founder of a company called This.Labs. We do JavaScript consulting. We're framework agnostic, so you can check out a ton of our open source projects. If you go to starter.dev and framework.dev, we have a lot of really great learning resources and starter kits for people to get started on some of these new technologies that are happening. So if you get excited about Quick or Svelte or Solid or a million others, come hang out.
Awesome. As we do, right?
Yes.
Yes. Next up,
you need something to entertain yourself.
Well, I feel like there's so much here too. I know we're going to talk about it, but there's so much right now in the JavaScript world that just is like, oh, I should try that. So I love your pitch. It was perfect. It was perfect.
I'm still waiting to try Vue, so I have a backlog of about 10 years.
We have that too.
You haven't tried Vue? Oh, that's funny.
I hear it's good. Like I've been hearing people talk about it. So.
I feel like you're not allowed to run the JavaScript survey without having at least flavored all of the libraries.
I mean, I've tried all of them, of course.
Oh yeah, of course. There you go.
Yeah, you're just an expert in everything, of course.
Welcome everybody. I see our stream numbers going up. It's so good to see you this evening or this morning. We're introducing our panel before we dive into the juicy details of the State of JavaScript survey. And our next guest that we're bringing to the stage is Emma Twerksky from the Angular team. Welcome, Emma.
Hi.
It's evening for you, right?
It is. You can tell. I'm trying to adjust my light so it looks normal.
No.
Yeah. Yes, it is a very dark, rainy San Francisco, California.
Honestly, it looked cozy. I was a little jealous.
It's not cozy. It's
okay.
Hailing over there.
Yeah. If I disappear, I've lost power. But yeah, my name is. I work on open source and Angular at Google. And yeah.
Awesome.
That's me.
Welcome. Thank you guys so much for your time tonight. I'm so honored that so many amazing guests are coming on to talk about JavaScript with us. Our next guest that we're introducing is Michelle, and please forgive me. Is it Backles? Did I say it right? Did I say it wrong?
Michelle Bakels.
Bagels! Hi. Welcome. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. So Michelle Bakels, I'm Program Director of Developer Health at G2I, so creating initiatives to support the mental and physical health of software developers, and the co-organizer of React Miami Conference.
Awesome. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Kathryn, can you then, do you know how to say Mike's last name? I really feel like if I couldn't do...
I bet Mike knows how to say Mike's
Yeah,
last
I
name.
sure do. Hey everyone, my name is Mike Bifulco. I'm a software developer and author and serial startup founder and co-host of the site APIs You Won't Hate. And I mostly deal in React these days, but have done a little bit of everything somewhere along the way.
Some people really do a little bit of everything. Here we were like joke dunking on Sasha about it, but you're here to show us all up.
For sure. I even forgot to mention I'm in week 2 of starting a new company. So I'm founding a startup that I haven't quite started talking about yet. So it's been a busy couple of weeks around here.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Hey Napalm, good to see you. So our next guest is Travis Waithmare, and if I butchered it, my darling, please correct me.
You said it perfectly, Travis Waithmare, like faith and hair, but with a W and an N instead. Anyway, but yeah, I'm a software engineer for Plex, but I'm probably most well known for my layout library called Bedrock Layouts. Both in React, I have a solid port as well as just a plain CSS framework version of it. And I just love working in open source and hanging out with Kathryn and Alyssa every once in a while.
Welcome. Super pumped to have you on. Our next guest, Jason Legenstorf. Did I do it? Was that right?
No.
There's no way that was right.
That was 100% most best effort. I really should not be emceeing us tonight.
You committed to it, and I'm fully on board.
Oh, darling, please correct it. Correct it.
Jason Langsdorf.
Langsdorf. Mine was just a very creative pronunciation. Can you introduce yourself, Jason?
Yeah, I am the host of Learn with Jason. It's a weekly show where I pair program with people from around the community to learn what's going on in web dev. And I also am a consultant for companies to help them do more creative and more effective developer outreach. And that's my full-time job as of this year.
Nice. Very cool. I think we have one other guest, but I don't think she is here yet, correct? Yeah. Oh, no, she is. She's below my scroll. My screen wasn't wide enough. Our last guest, welcome on. Shande, is that how you say it? Did I say it right?
All right. Alyssa. Yeah, you said it right. Shande, like the day of the week. Saturday, Sunday, Shande. My name's Shande Person. I am a senior software engineer at Netflix on the productivity UI team, which means I make, hey Jason, I see a lot of friends on here. I make tools for other Netflix engineers. I typically use React, TypeScript, and GraphQL. Now I'm learning. I'm also a speaker these days, a writer, and I'm developing a course on TypeScript as well.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Shande left out that she's also the best analogist I've ever come across.
Oh yeah, how could I forget? So if you need an analogy, I'm your girl.
Oh, I was thinking like logistics and like math. Okay, we're not the other kind of analogy. I was like, whoa, we got like a mathematician on. Okay, no,
you think you like analysis?
Analysis. Yep, there we go. I am fully here. Yes. Welcome, everyone. I am so honored to have you all. So I know we've got quite a bit to cover for the survey. I first off wanted to ask Sasha about the new features, just like open the gate and let me see. Will you share actually, Kathryn? I'm sorry. I know I like totally told you I was going to screen share for this one, but
it's all good.
Awesome. So I was wondering, Sasha, if you wanted to quickly touch on some of the new features, because it's like the same amazing survey, but there's some really, really cool things. And so I wanted to dive into that before we talked about specific results and forecasts.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. There's quite a few new features. Maybe too many. Like I feel I compensate for something by adding too many features to my projects. Yeah, the first one is the Data Explorer.
Mm.
And the key thing about that is the data is dynamic, meaning that usually when you read a report, the data is pre-compiled, so it's static. But here you can actually change the parameters and compare any two variables and kind of cross-reference them together. So, for example, you could see salary breakdown by gender or by usage of a specific framework. Here, years of experience for the people who use or don't use React.
Mhm.
This
And
is
then
gonna, I feel like, tell on us. Isaiah is a React developer, and it did a little bit.
so you can see those little green dots. They appear wherever there's like an imbalance or something that's more or more than expected if it's green, or if it's like outlined, it's fewer than expected. So here, what it means is if you look at the people who say they've never heard of React, there are the people who have less than 1 year of experience are very, very overrepresented, which you would expect, because if you have more than 1 year, you've probably come across React. So this is a way to see how the demographics break down and also highlight any outliers. And you can click on any cell to get more details and kind of an explanation of what the data means.
Very cool. And this was, I also wanted to highlight this. These things are also on the CSS survey, which
Yes.
The results are out as well. So it's really, really cool to look at all the web ongoings. But I love this data analysis view. When I first saw it, I was very overwhelmed, as I am with many data display things. I just always like kind of start hyperventilating. But when you explained it, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I get it now. So I'm so glad.
Yeah,
I'm
because I didn't want to pay too much for hosting for the API, so I made sure not many people can actually use it. So like the server will get overloaded.
See, now you're thinking with portals. That's smart.
I think my next favorite feature is the comments, which I know Proxies has one, but I'm trying to think of like another easy one to get to show it off.
I'm pretty sure
So-
libraries have comments.
If you look at
Maybe
the
not.
front-end frameworks
There we
or
go.
any section, so it's a bit hard to find. I need to figure out something for next year, but if you scroll down, you can click on any library name like React, like in the little bubbles, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I
here,
see.
comments.
Oh, there they are. Yes.
Yeah. And these are comments submitted by people as they are taking the survey.
I'm
So-
dying, Fred.
It's gone too far. Oh. Mm.
Oh boy.
So the comments I don't think were available last year, correct?
No,
Like,
that's
this
a
is
new feature.
Okay.
So I really wanted to get like a more
I
qualitative
love that one. I
sense
was
of what people
forced to,
think.
but I would rather not.
These are absolutely sending me.
Would not
I'm gonna
use
choose.
again.
But like we will have to.
Oh my gosh. Too
So
big
I
for
think-
my purposes? What? How small do they? What?
Definitely will use again, not by choice.
I love this though. So for
Hold
each feature, because these are for the frameworks, but I know
Yeah.
as I was like looking at other like features of JavaScript and things, I think they all have comments. Oh yes, Angular. I see what you did there, Catherine.
I feel like my React bias was actually not helping us in this case. And we should see what people have to say about Angular.
We're here for the comments. It's the best.
It's very opinionated. The worst
Is this like Jimmy Kimmel's like mean tweet reading kind of thing?
Let's just
Oh,
call
yeah.
this the JavaScript roast. Like,
the
Can we
JavaScript
get
worst.
some dramatic readings?
Well, I think maybe for
So it's
smaller
very
libraries or tools, it could actually be useful for the library authors, because sometimes it's hard to know what people actually think. I mean, you know what your users think, maybe, but here I wanted to capture like people who maybe they've just heard about it but decided not to use it for some reason, and it's a bit more general than just your your GitHub issues or something like that. So that was the thinking behind that new feature.
Yeah, definitely folks seem to like it in the comments. Gcelebrate says this is a great format. So definitely some folks excited about it. It is nice. It's fun to see.
I think
Like
so.
this guy.
Data Explorer, messages. I think the third one chart filters, right? And that's our third one before we.
Oh yeah. So if you go to demographics, for example, because this is not implemented for all charts, only like vertical bar charts. But if you scroll down a bit, scroll down
Too far.
more.
Oop.
No, we have to find line one that actually has the icon.
I see.
So exactly. So
Gotcha.
this will let you add additional data series on the same chart. So you can do two things. You can add multiple series, and you can combine filters inside a series. So here you will have one that's like company size, 1 employee, and yearly salary. So that's probably going to be a pretty small sample size, but you can do that. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just playing with the filters.
Yeah. And you can also change the year, so you can use that also to compare year over year.
I did change the year, so we should see
What was the first year? What does it say in the?
I have 2022 data and 2021 data for folks that said.
So depending on which filters you choose, it might be meaningful or not. So
like this one was not.
I mean, here it's survey completion, so that's probably not really correlated with anything, but you can imagine if you pick age and like years of experience or something, or salary, you can see
Oh, nice.
So we can see where the 50-100K bracket lives in regards to age.
All right, cool. Well, were you happy, Sacha? Were you like, it is done, I did it, I pulled off another survey? Were you satisfied with this past year?
Yeah, I'm burned out, but happy.
Oh my goodness.
I know you guys got twice as many responses this year, right?
Yeah, we did. So I think it's mostly due to YouTube and streamers. I kind of realized, I'm late to the party, but I realized that's actually a huge audience, much bigger than Twitter or Facebook or anything else. Especially for the State of CSS survey, I think we had 10% of all respondents come from a single video by Kevin Powell.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And here we had a bunch come from a Fireships video. He linked to the survey. So and I also want to shout out like other streamers like Trash. I know he took the survey live on stream, and that also raised awareness a lot. So I really think it's a cool new avenue to explore in terms of reaching out to new communities and driving more traffic. And it was amazing to get almost twice as much respondents year over year.
Awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Congratulations.
So now to some things that we saw from the survey. Was anyone shocked by results? Was it like pretty much what we anticipated from the 2022 survey?
This is open field. Anyone here, if you saw something you thought that was crazy or that was neat, this is your chance.
Honestly, the thing that like surprised me, but then kind of didn't once I thought about it, was just how far Gatsby's retention has dropped over 2 years. Like it was like 70%, I think, like a couple years ago, and now it's like 30% or less.
It's rendering frameworks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I misclicked. I promise I know what Gatsby is. I just can't control my mouse. So
yeah.
But
well, interestingly enough, sorry to interrupt, but this site is built with Gatsby, so it's kind of ironic.
But I wonder like what that's related to. Is it because there's more tools like Astro and 11D and things like that coming out, or is it coming more from like Next, like stealing some of their like market share by kind of coming in? Anyway, that's the biggest thing that was like curious to me, is like how did it drop from grace so quickly?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like when Gatsby first came out, and I could be totally wrong here, but I feel like when Gatsby came out, everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, it needs to be a Gatsby site. Everything needs to be a Gatsby." It doesn't matter if it's like good for my use case or not. And then now I feel like the conversations are very much like, okay, is it good for my use case? Should I use it? Should I not? But that's just been my observation.
I'm a little biased here. I used to work at Gatsby, full disclosure, but I think that Gatsby's fall from grace is a good indication of like you have to treat your people and your community well, or they notice. Because if you follow Gatsby, they had a huge loss of basically everybody that worked there, and they had a big shakeup with the community on just not treating their consultants well, not being particularly inclusive, and I think that led to basically they shed all of their mind share and all of their goodwill in like 2 fell swoops.
Ooh.
Yeah, I want to second that. I take notice. I'm actually a career switcher. I switched from sales and business career, and so a lot of what I look at in a framework isn't necessarily the technology, though it's an important part. It's also the way that they treat their community, as Jason said, and the way that they do their marketing, and what kind of niches or groups they try to fit, and the ones that they kind of not oppress, but the ones that they offend. And I did notice around the time Gatsby did their layoffs, and there were certain things that were, it just seemed like came off as very insensitive to the community. I think that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And my general thought is that people are good people and they want to see other people be treated well. Next has done an amazing job with their marketing strategy and has segmented their market to make sure that they're targeting the people who are in their network, and then also targeting people who want to advocate for them and say, okay, well, yes, I use Next for this, and I built this cool thing using Next, and it's created a lot of buzz without the whole like, let's offend this entire group of people, or let's just be cruel to these other groups of people. So I would say, and when people come to me and ask what to use for their sites, their personal sites, or even sites that we're standing up here at Netflix, it's always a conversation of Gatsby versus Next when it's something that would be like SSG related. It's never, Gatsby and something else. And so just being so dominant for Next, naturally it would wipe out a lot of the Gatsby usage as people choose Next over Gatsby.
I also think like Gatsby as a framework that came out doing a lot right out of the box, and that's a great way to gain mindshare and gain users. But it's also very hard to maintain like good APIs and good documentation over a really large surface like that. And I've seen the same thing happen to maybe something like Meteor, where at the start there's a lot of hype, which is it's valid because the framework is really great at what it does. But as soon as you kind of bump into the edges of that initial use case, because it does so much, it's kind of harder to make it evolve. And I think that the same thing happened to Gatsby. Like recently they've had some great new updates, but I think it might have been a bit too slow to adapt, because it does do a lot.
Yeah, I think, and we've sort of seen a similar issue with anybody who tries to be the good for everything framework. And I think AWS is trying to solve this with Amplify, and we're kind of seeing the same thing Sacha's describing, where it's people get on it, the happy path is great, and then you have to do something that it's not built to do, and you kind of get dropped off a cliff into build it yourself AWS land. I think Gatsby has long had that problem where it's like, hey, you're going to build it, you're going to use a plugin. As soon as you don't need a plugin, surprise, you're writing GraphQL resolvers from scratch. And so it kind of makes the happy path happy, and the unbeaten path is thorny as hell.
Yeah, I think that's why tools like Astro are interesting, because it's a bit more flexible and it doesn't hold your hands as much in the beginning, but also the transition to doing more complex things, it's probably easier than with Gatsby.
So I have strong opinions here, and also another caveat, because I am under contract with Astro right now, so it is part of my compensation is that I'm supposed to make them sound good. But I will say one of the reasons that I pursued that contract in the first place is that Astro is almost in my opinion, the inverse of something like Gatsby or Next, which is like Gatsby or Next. Their approach to development is You must adopt us all the way and use all of our features, or else you're going to have a bad time. And so it's the inverse of the rule of least power. It's like throw all of this at your projects or else. And so that's why I think people were kind of soured on like the React server components drop in Next and the app directory. It's like, that's a lot of stuff that approach, it helps you with edge cases that the vast majority of projects don't need. So why is that the default experience? Why is that where people are starting? Whereas Astro takes the exact opposite approach. And, you know, this is what I love about 11D as well. And what I loved about Jekyll when I was still doing anything with Ruby is they do exactly nothing until you ask them to do more. They're effectively like template compilers until you turn on additional features. So they're really buying into that rule of least power. And as a developer, when you pick up Astro, you ship 0 kilobytes of JavaScript by default. With 11D, 0 kilobytes of JavaScript by default. And it's not until you need a feature or choose a feature that you're putting more power behind the thing that you're building. And so that means that you're getting these kind of the happy path, the default experience is the best one for the user. And you don't have to learn the advanced features of Astro to use it effectively, or of 11D or of Jekyll. You can just use it as a template generator and get a great experience. And then as you get deeper into it, you can add more layers. But ultimately, it doesn't require you to understand any of the like the underlying techniques, any of the underlying philosophies. You don't have to care about Astro or 11D to use them well. And I think that's one of the really big shifts that we're seeing with stuff like with this new category of rendering frameworks, to use the terminology from the survey.
Yeah, along with that, I've never actually used Astro, but I've heard amazing things about it. I did see a conference talk on it late last year, and I was doing a talk on Remix, and I saw some parallels. Jason, you touched on this a lot, but in Remix, they call it progressive enhancement, where it's like they give you the bare minimum. They're using the fundamentals of the web as the fundamentals of the framework. So they're scaling back the JavaScript and leaning into things like HTTP, browsers, and like browser caching, all the things that come fundamental to your browser. And then when you need to do extra stuff, then they add in the JavaScript. And so, and you tell the framework that it's going to add the JavaScript, and this is what it's going to do and when it's going to do it. Other frameworks have, like JavaScript frameworks have leaned into more JavaScript. And what that does is it makes apps very heavy, and it takes the browser a longer time to parse it. And apps used to be a lot smaller. It's just like, you know, a quick little, you know, web page. And now apps are getting more and more complicated as there's more things that we want to be able to do and incorporate with it. And so for your users who have slow internet connections, or if you have like huge like bundle sizes in your JavaScript, which comes out of the box with a lot of frameworks, it takes a long time for your users to be able to see the app and to interact with it. And so they end up having a bad experience. Then on top of that, as Jason mentioned, it creates a bad developer experience as well, because you have to know all of the things to be able to get it to work. So frameworks like Astro or Remix, where they're scaling back, are good both for the user, wherever they're at, if they're, you know, stuck in rainy, haily California right now, or great for the developers as well.
So jumping off of that, kind of tangentially, was something that I noticed and thought was really interesting, which was that there was a question this year, right, in the opinion section, that building JavaScript apps is overly complex right now. And the answers were more evenly split than I was expecting, because I'm pretty sure my answer was like, yeah, agree strongly. But the split between like disagreeing, neutral, and agreeing was like, the numbers are almost exactly the same. Based on kind of the conversation that we've been having, I feel like I can guess the way that this group is leaning, but I'm curious to hear kind of where y'all fell on that spectrum and what your thoughts were, and if this was the answer that you expected to this question, or whether you were surprised as I was.
Yeah, I think this is a place where it might be interesting to see like another dimension added to this chart of like, I'd really love to see what the Astro people think about this versus what the Gatsby people think about it versus what the Next people think about it. Because that like this tells part of the story, but certainly not all of it for me. I do feel like there's been a strong emphasis on developer experience and like build tools and things like that to make our lives easier. But I would also say if your job is to make those like build tools better, you're probably feeling like things are pretty difficult right now too. So like more context needed is how I felt about this chart, I think.
I'm also
I
curious
agree
about
with
years of
that.
experience related to that, because like
Yes.
people who have only known this, like who are like 2-3 years, like they're like, this is just how you build apps, isn't it? Or people who've been around since like early 2000s are like, no, we used to like write this out manually and like FTP in like manually update static files, and so like I think
used to upload
that would be an
uphill
interesting
both ways in a snowstorm.
What were you saying, Michelle?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I think experience is really helpful for this context because agreed, like there are people that are like, JavaScript, you can always build JavaScript, just a JavaScript app, you know, plain and simple. But if I were like a junior developer coming in year one and you're one of these people that are like looking online, you know, trying to teach yourself, it was hard enough when you were trying to pick between like Angular and React. And then when you're like, oh no, Vue. And so now I can't like imagine what it must be like for somebody trying to learn how to build web apps to come in and be like, oh, here's Quick and Astro. And like, there's all of these things. And even the people who've been in the space for a long time, I mean, even Sasha said, I haven't really used Vue yet, but that's like hard to tell from the outside looking.
Well,
It's so funny.
Well, when you look at years of experience too on the survey, it's like, you know, it's like what, 22% 3 to 5 years, 10% 1 to 2 years. There's 20% 6 to 10 years. Then there's like a lot of no answer. So maybe like the years of experience of the people who actually did the survey is a little bit skewed too.
I really would have thought it was opposite of like beginners would have thought that it's this is fine, right? We're not on fire. But experienced people who are like actually know about all of the options and like all of the different avenues to go down and all of the pitfalls that come with those and architecturing decisions, and like I feel like the more experience you get, the more you know that you don't know. So like it would be really interesting to see that, because everyone here seems to think like, or was leaning towards, if you have more experience, maybe you think, you know, it's the ecosystem's not too overly complex, whereas I feel like, I don't know.
Well, it's hard to tell too with the years of experience because it's kind of like split half and half. It's like the most people is in the 3 to 5 years, but that's only like 22% versus like the 6 to 10 years is like 20%, you know? So what does it actually tell you? It tells you anything you actually want to think,
Yeah.
think you know.
Tracy, what does it mean?
Well, and
I kind of wonder. Oh, sorry, Catherine. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like that's actually an important conversation that we kind of rehab every year, and not in a bad way when we do this stream, is just the acknowledgement that like, this is really only painting a portion of the picture. And this data is just a snapshot, and it reflects the people that answered the survey and not necessarily the entire JavaScript ecosystem. There's always kind of questions of like reach and what these numbers actually reflect. And so I think it's good, honestly, that every year we kind of have this conversation where we go, well, actually, we should take this with a grain of salt. Like, it's useful, but it shouldn't be the be all end all, you know?
Yeah, I think especially when you look at the demographics, like this was overwhelmingly data from white dudes. You know, it's like over 2/3 white, and I think majority dudes answered the survey. And so this is an ultra slanted view into the JavaScript community when we look at it on the merits of the data.
Yeah.
Well, and I was also going to just say, I wonder if this is like a maturation of the JavaScript developer, because it's like probably within pretty much around the time that this survey started, that a JavaScript developer wasn't a backend guy who happened to write JavaScript. We really actually had proper JavaScript developers. And so we're moving out of like the toddler and the teen years and kind of moving into this more mature developer who are like, are we doing the right thing by like shoving all the JavaScript we possibly can and throwing that down to the client? Is that really a good idea? And anyway, I think that's just a sign that we're like maturing as a developer community.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
wanted to add a point about also developers online too. Because I think like on Twitter and in kind of like these developer spaces online, it's a good way to get like a temperature read on something and to get some feedback. But I think it also is kind of like the subset of developers who like go out of their way to communicate with each other outside of their normal developer spaces. And like if you work in a really big company, especially back in the in-person days, corporate big companies, you know, I would work with like hundreds of developers, none of which are on Twitter, and we're all making like really big decisions and like analyzing frameworks and stuff like that. And there would be like maybe like one random person that would be like, have you guys heard of Svelte? And that's like the Svelte guy now. And like, you know, when you're on Twitter, like, you know, everybody's talking about Svelte and you can like interact with like a bunch of people in the Svelte community. It feels like such a huge thing. And like, you know, like when you're outside of those spaces and you're kind of like, not to say like quote unquote the real world or whatever, but like there are other developer spaces that are like not this extroverted or like world that are just like totally oblivious to like a lot of like, not in a bad way, but just like if you could really survey all the developers, like I could only imagine the numbers for like Angular and React would be like,
I so wish we could. I just want to know. I just want to know.
Well, I mean, anybody here who's worked at a larger company, like when I worked at IBM, for example, we had a ton of like Ember and Backbone and jQuery in production, and it was. You know, we weren't like starting new projects in it, but we maintained it every day. We worked in it every day. And so I think, I don't remember who said it this way, but somebody came up with the term dark matter developers, which is all the people who just show up to work and do their job. They're not reading blogs. They're not on social media, everything that Michelle just said.
They're not at conferences or streaming or watching streams. I know. There's so many of them. I love that term. I'm so glad you brought it up again. Thank you, Jason. But it does go to show that
something.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
Say it, Sasha.
Oh yeah, something I often tell people is that the goal of the survey is not to reflect like the current state of JavaScript, and I don't know why people would think that, but it's actually to anticipate the upcoming trends. That's the main goal. And of course, there's way more people who use Angular, but I do think the survey can let you know that, hey, Svelte is something that might be coming up, and eventually even the dark matter developers will, if the trends keep steady, will hear about Svelte and use it. So yeah, I mean, obviously. And another point related to that is, Kathryn, you mentioned that the audience doubled, and I think because of that, there's some trends that look a little bit weird, like in terms of feature usage sometimes. And so one feature can go from 80% last year to 70% this year, and that's just because the audience is a bit different. So it's really good to keep in mind that the audience is whatever the audience is, and it's not gonna be able to reflect, of course, every single JavaScript developer's experience. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point. Like, clearly we're hyper online people. I'll speak for myself. I'm a hyper online person. But
I was laughing because I was thinking like the whole last 5 minutes have been like, okay, so we should touch grass is what I'm hearing.
But it's interesting because it's like, okay, so if you look at awareness, right? 2% of people said that they were aware of what Quick was or something. I don't know where.
Hold on, I'll pull it up.
There was something that was like really small. Like the number of people that like said that they had used Quick was really small out of like this massive group of people. But those 2% of people are probably going to be like the hyper online people who are testing out this like super beta unknown thing that
there we go.
Yeah, you do. Right. It's like
there they are.
So like, okay, but then, and retention doesn't really matter in that case because like it's 2% of people like.
But they are still using it.
Yeah,
very high among those two guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting a pulse on like what the first people to use it are, and that sort of reflects how these frameworks or how anything in this does over time. Whereas that 2% becomes 20%, becomes 40%, becomes 100% of people are aware of it. Like the usage goes down, the retention goes down, the interest goes down. but you get a really interesting pulse on like what the first impressions of things are. I didn't know I could look at the comments, so I was looking at the comments of like, what do the 2% of people think?
Oh,
Well,
it is interesting.
was it juicy?
No, I mean they're all juicy, right? Like
the comments are all
surveys are
fantastic.
great.
I wanted to say, I feel like I've had a really interesting experience over the past, 2 months-ish, as I am one of the lucky few who's abandoned Twitter. And so as I've been like nestling my home in on Mastodon there, it almost feels like, geez, as an American, let me couch this in that, the first time you go to Europe and it's like, oh my gosh, everything's different, but kind of the same here. And I've through like that experience been bumping into a lot of people online who like have very different work lives, but work in very similar roles. So it is really cool to see people like who use Vue for a living in a way that I have never done, or like really delve into React Native or something like that to get their job done, who I never encountered on Twitter, right? I feel like there's almost like there's layers and layers of people that you can sort of meet and encounter. And it's really interesting in the demographics view of this survey that I think there was like 93 people from Mastodon who took the survey, which may be like a challenge of figuring out all the different Mastodon servers you can, track traffic from. But I'll be really interested to see how that changes next year, because that's what, like 1/100th of a percent, compared to Twitter, for example, something like that. So yeah, would be really interesting to see how that changes, and also like how your all perspective comes together on where you're getting your information from. If you're starting to find new people to follow, new content coming from like LinkedIn, for example, or Mastodon or whatever else it is.
You're telling me you're not getting all your information from Microsoft Teams?
That's where I get my best information, is from Teams, for sure.
Is that like is there a community on Teams, or are we just talking about like okay.
Absolutely not.
While we're here on demographics, one thing I have this question every time, which is like when we look at like the percent of by race and by gender, and Jason said this, like it's like blown away by white people, white males, I mean. Yeah. And I'm like, is this like an representation of like really what the developer community out there is? And I'm like, I don't feel like it is, but like
no, it's not.
And I'm like, or are we what like? And then the other question then is like, what can we do to like get a better representation across the board of developer community, of people who will take the survey and actually go through it?
I want to go a step further. How do we get the dark matter devs to be hyper online, or maybe just semi online?
I don't want to disturb their peace. I think they've got it figured out, and we should listen to them.
Kathryn.
But I think I do think that this is like the eternal challenge is, if a group doesn't show up somewhere, how do you make them feel welcome, especially if you're not part of that group? And it was a big challenge at Gatsby, and when I stopped actively advocating for it, we saw what happened. And it's one of those things that if it's a thing that's important to you, it's got to be baked into the DNA of how things operate. Like you have to partner with people from those communities. You have to really buy in and like listen when they talk. You have to show up in spaces that they dominate and listen. And try, like get on their side, support them in ways so that it's not just. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of us make, and one that I'm guilty of as well, is not saying anything and then showing up to ask a favor, and saying like, hey, will you come like do this hackathon at my company, or hey, do you want to be part of this panel at our conference? And they've never heard from me before. Like, who the hell am I? How do they know? How does anybody in that group know they can trust me to not just tokenize them? Or I'm only showing up because I've got to meet a quota of like not having all white dudes on my panels, right? Like you have to be an advocate all the time, not just when you need something, if you want groups to start to feel welcome. And once you have started doing that work, when people from those groups start to show up, buy into them, give them authority, give them things to own and control, and then get the hell out of their way and let them run the community, right? Like the community should represent the people that you want to be there. And so you've got to make sure that you let them be in positions of control.
Yeah, I think, that's something I struggle with every year. And Yeah, I don't know if it's like you said, Jason. It's important that it's baked into the thing from the start. I don't know if it is. I mean, honestly, it's something I still struggle with myself. I don't know if I'm doing enough. I don't know if it's hard to find the time. I don't know. I don't even know what works or doesn't work. So far, I haven't really, you know, found like a magic bullet to, you know, solve that problem. And even more, I'm not sure that it can be solved, because if we're talking about reaching out to more, dark matter developers, what if those developers are primarily white dudes as well? Then it will, skew that ratio even more. And if we reach out to more developers in some other countries, that might also skew the ratio in a way that we don't want it to go on some other parameters. So, oh, sorry about that.
I mean, I would challenge that, because like, just look at this room. Like, this room is significantly more diverse than the respondent set of the survey this year, and I don't think that was done through an intentional effort to like find diverse people. This is just a representation of the JavaScript community.
I do
So
it. I feel like
it
Kathryn and I do it accidentally on anything we organize, and I've really tried to help some male developer advocates whom I know, who I don't know why it happens. I just like have
I
a
was
list.
just laughing at the thought of like, I really try to help because it feels like we should give some white dudes a platform, But every time we host something, it's.
I was just trying to like help
I'm just
them
not
like
represented enough. I mean,
diversify, and I don't know. I make better friends is my best advice.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a really great point, because this panel there's no reason why this panel has to represent, anything. Like, what are we trying to represent, I guess, is my question, versus what are we trying to communicate. I think that's the more important thing, right? Like, it doesn't matter. No conference is like, okay, there's like 65% of men in the JavaScript community, so we're going to have 65% of men on our panel. The goal is to give a voice to as diverse a community as possible. And so I've kind of stopped obsessing over the numbers in the survey, to be honest, because I'm like, I mean, they are what they are. What's important is, well, is there a way to surface minoritized voices through tools like selecting, filtering data by race or gender or location? Is the survey giving, voice to people, to a diverse crowd to write the conclusions, to write the picks, and the kind of the more content-focused part of the thing? Are the people who are actually designing the survey and taking part in the survey process, are those people representing of a diverse enough crowd and diverse enough perspective? So the final number of the gender breakdown is kind of what people focus on, because it's very visible. But for me, it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, it's not. It doesn't matter, because it's important, at least so that we can check that whether we are doing a good job or not from year to year. So that's good. But yeah, I mean, I take the criticism, and I think it's very valid. But at this point, it's not my main area of focus. And again, I'm talking specifically about that number, not diversity and representation as a whole.
I think the piece that is important to me is, like, if we look at the resources section of the survey, and we look at the people that get listed, the creators that get cited, it is overwhelmingly white dudes. And if this survey gets cited as like a kingmaker in who in the community is influential and who has a voice, when if the majority of people choose people that look like them, and that ends up being who ends up on the list, regardless of the quality, right? Because I saw on the list this year, there are people who haven't made videos in years somehow got put on the list. And so to see that, and to see people who are active creators not even in the running to make the list, that is a concern, because what it shows me is, like, as a community, if we're leaving out a whole swath of people who are great creators because nobody thought to invite them in the first place, then it perpetuates that cycle of, the white dudes are in charge, the white dudes put up kings, the kings get made, they put up other kings, those kings get made, and like nobody ever gets a chance to come through the door. And so I think this is one of those things that, like, you know, I see people in the chat saying like, why bring it in at all? And yeah, ideally we would never have to talk about it. But right now, the way that it gets talked about, there's a very small section of the demographic that is extremely overrepresented and tends to drive the conversation for everybody else, whether or not they want to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, it kind of goes towards what I was saying, that so what you bring up, like who is included in the survey in terms of the options that are proposed when you take the survey, right? When you click the little boxes, that's something that we do have control over. So we can have like an open debate, who should be in the list? Do we only go by, you know, number of YouTube subscribers? Do we try to make a more diverse list? So that's a debate we can have, and that's actually, I think, a lot more productive rather than just arguing about, oh, there's 90% of men or however it was. And so, yeah, I think we just need to be a bit more granular about what can we, where is our attention and focus most effective, I guess. And the thing you just brought up is definitely an area where we can improve.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's arguing. I think there just needs to be an acknowledgement that what we are seeing in the data here is not representative of the community. Ideally, because this is such a popular survey, it would be more representative. There are lots of steps that we can take to kind of get there. And I honestly don't even want to address that comment in the chat that says, why even bring race and gender into it? Because it's inherently a part of everything we create. The biases that we bring are reflected in the code that we make. And if our users are going to be from all sorts of races and genders, then ideally all those races and genders should be included in the creation of the product itself. But I am going to go ahead and move us along a little bit, just looking at the clock. I don't want to cut anybody off, and I feel like we were able to kind of have a good chat on this. But there's a lot of content here.
One last thing, sorry.
Sure.
Because it's something that, you know, I'm very passionate about, and I get called out a lot on. So that's my one chance a year to defend myself. I think when you talk about community, we also have to realize that it can be something we create, right? There's not like one JavaScript community. Every one of us has a different experience. So some of us might work in very diverse settings, some might not. And at the end of the day, I do think we get to choose what community we want to represent, but also it's not something that's gonna be, you know, there's no single truth, but we can choose what we represent and what we communicate. I think it's an important point because a lot of the time people kind of assume that, okay, what they live is exactly how things are for everybody else, and that's just not the case. Okay, I'll shut up. Sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead and there's no clean way to be like, I'm going to shift the topic. But I feel like, honestly, we could spend the whole panel, we could spend easily another hour talking about kind of the natural state of the demographics of the state of JavaScript. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. So I do want to talk a little bit about that too. But definitely sound off in the comments, keep the chat going. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of shifting our focus into the next year and what we think is coming and some of the trends that we are looking forward to. So it's curious if anyone wanted to kick us off kind of either based on the data you saw or just based on the intuition or the experience of being perpetually online, what you think we have to look forward to in the next year of JavaScript.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind as I was kind of leafing through this earlier today is that I'm very interested in seeing how people who live in our world who deal in a lot of JavaScript and like tying things together from various services start to interface over the next year with no-code and low-code tools as they become more popular. Because I think there's really going to be an emergence of like people like us building enablement for no-code tools and tying into things like Zapier and Bubble and Webflow and things like that a lot more. And for a lot of developers, they recoil in horror when you tell them that no code is good or useful or anything like that. But I've taken a strong public stance on like no code being a thing of embrace to bring other people into the fold and to work more directly with things that we do. And Sacha, I'm kind of interested if that's something you're thinking about or if it's something that you're maybe going to address in next year's survey as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's not really something I've thought about too much. Yeah, I wonder how we could bring it in. Maybe that's something we can discuss offline. But yeah, there's I think maybe one issue the survey has is because we always try to compare with previous year's data. Sometimes I don't even think about whole new areas I could ask about. So definitely keep the suggestions coming.
I think another trend is developer experience. So I think like I've never seen the developer space like as friendly to developers as I have in the last year. Granted, I only have like 5 or 6 years to compare that to, but just in this last year, it felt like companies were putting a high priority on adoption. I think it really came to the forefront how important it is for developers to like to code. There's because obviously there's like the stereotype where we're like we all like secretly hate our jobs and it's so hard and like you know, there's just some technologies that have like taken a step forward and say like this doesn't have to be miserable. There are a lot of common use cases that we can abstract and make easier, and we can try and like whittle this experience down to exactly the thing that's inspiring for developers, that they can focus on that, and we can try and make it as easy as possible for them to ship their code and be there for them. So like customer service and like even just the way that people are responding and communicating on Twitter to developers who are having issues. You know, not saying that doesn't happen anymore, but when you see somebody like have an issue with a library on Twitter, it's like almost like there's somebody there from the team or the community to be like, what is that problem that you're having? Like, how can I help you solve it? Instead of just like, well, that's React for you, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like
My
also
big
that just comes with like, sorry.
Go ahead, Tracy.
That just comes with like, I think a lot of choices, right? Like you have a million choices now in the ecosystem. You don't have to just choose one. So, you know, we see like, you know, I guess you could use the Gatsby versus the Next and kind of how that's changed and shifted tides, and kind of the same thing with like Webpack to, let's say, Vite or whatever it is, you know, just kind of shifting tides as well. If you don't have a good developer experience and if you don't focus on that, then, you know, people will go elsewhere, or people will build something else, right? Because they're annoyed with not having good developer experience.
I think we've also seen an active realization as an industry that there are two types, or maybe even more, of software industries, and one of them is explicitly you make tools to sell to developers, and that's very different from what we were building 5 years ago, where, you know, we were building software for consumers. When you build WordPress, developers are a secondary market, not the primary market. When you're building Sanity, developers are the primary market. You have to sell to developers or they will never sell it into their team. And I think that has led to the financial incentives realigned too. So we've shifted the commerce of building software to where developers are one of the largest drivers of revenue for this. And, you know, granted, this group, I think we are very much in the, we build software for software developers in a lot of cases. I don't know if this is as true for like Shonda at Netflix. But I think that in a lot of cases, yeah, I mean, building internal tools, though, that is, you're building tools for devs, and I think that has really shifted the general, like, where companies are willing to invest or put money, and developer experience has become a proven profit center. If you invest in developer experience, more developers enjoy using your tool, they'll go out and advocate on your behalf, and more dollars go into your pocket. So it's no longer a hard uphill sell anymore, I don't think.
I was trying to find, I thought that there was a question, and I have not found it yet, but there was one where it was like what you prioritize when choosing a library. And remind me, Sasha, if that's still in here, or where I can find that, or if I'm crossing my wires with something that was in the state of CSS survey.
No, I think I did remove that because the results weren't changing much from year to year.
That's fair.
But yeah, there is definitely that question about how people prioritize choosing a library in last year's survey, at least. That's
it. But what I was bringing up was that developer experience is almost always the primary, the first response there. And I'm not surprised to hear that hasn't changed much year to year, honestly. Because yeah, if a developer can't do anything with it in a productive way, then it almost doesn't matter what else it can do. You don't want to fight with it all day, you know? So
Yeah, and I can speak to us at Netflix. So like my team is called the Productivity UI engineering team, and it's a team of hundreds of engineers because we have thousands of engineers at Netflix, and they're expensive. It's expensive to hire a developer, and when they're stuck on build fails or like tests that were never implemented, if any roadblocks that they have is costing the company money. So from an overall corporate perspective, Netflix as well as other companies, and I'm seeing like more and more teams. I met with the productivity team at Yelp, and there's other there's communities of teams that do what I do, which is like make the developer experience better. We build tools that make the developer experience better at Netflix. We invest in like looking and seeing what tools we should buy to make the overall experience better, because it saves the company money, it saves your engineers time that they could be using to do other things, create better things. So both from a financial perspective as well as just like a sanity perspective as an engineer, I see developer experience as being one of the more important things going into the future of JavaScript.
So one thing, thinking about, we were talking about predictions here, for like a long time, like WebAssembly has always kind of been the same thing as like blockchain for me. Everyone's like, this is really cool, what do I do with it? And like, I think we're finally getting to the point where like we know what to do with it now. So here's my no consequence predictions that 2023 we'll see WebAssembly like kind of take a bigger role than it has, because we're finally, Figma's using it, like people are figuring out how to use it appropriately.
Travis, I'm actually really curious. I feel like, and maybe this is just because I'm like of the extremely online, but I feel like every year for the last several years, somebody said, this is the year WASM's going to do it. And it never does. So what do you think is different?
Well, like I said, it's my no consequence big prediction, because like, no one's going to come back and see this. Yeah.
I love it. I'm all about those big. It's like whenever my husband looks at me and he's like, should I risk the biscuit at family board game night? And I go, honey, there's nothing on the line here. Let's just, yeah, go ahead and gamble that one. So I love it, Travis. I love the big predictions.
Well, maybe we should keep
Part of
track of
that
the
is-
predictions and then bring them up again next year, you know, just to keep everybody accountable.
Just as long as I'm not on the panel again. I know what you're kidding. No, the where I'm getting is like, it's, well, part of it was from the survey. I was thinking about that. Like, I'm really seeing like WASM like actually kind of like being adopted, but it seemed like forever it was just like people like, look what we can do with WASM. Look, we can write Blazor, and we can do, all you backend developers cannot write JavaScript, you know, just to make you feel happy. And sorry, for all the Blazor fans, it's really cool. Actually, I'm interested in Blazor, but like, that's what it seemed like it was used at first for. But like now we're really more and more tools. Like, and maybe it's partly because I've actually did something with WASM like within the last 2 years, that like if I touched it, I think more and more people are really actually going to want to touch it and find where it fits in their stack. And more tools are going to help people make it fit in their stack, whether they need it or not, whether they know how to use it directly or not.
Anyone else have like predictions that maybe contradict Travis, that say, you know,
fight.
I think I might have a pretty hot take. I think that this year is going to be the watershed moment that sees React take the same slide that Webpack, Angular, and jQuery have taken, to still being widely adopted and widely used, but no longer being the default recommendation for new projects.
I don't want to agree, and yet here I am.
Do you think that there will be a default recommendation, or do you think that there will be more of a conversation?
I hope that it's more of a conversation, but I think if any of these new, like, if Svelte is ready, if Solid's ready, if Quick is ready, if one of them gets their ducks in a row and is ready with a strong message, I think they can pick up a lot of these devs who are feeling the frustration at like React has grown significantly in complexity. The governance is changing. People are uncomfortable with that. They're like ripping up a lot of the way that React used to work and introducing a bunch of things that people don't understand that are way more complicated to put in place. So I think that this feels like the Webpack 4 to 5 thing to me, where like Webpack 4, everybody was frustrated, and Webpack 5, everybody's like, oh, I got to change. I'm just going to use something different instead.
Alyssa's smiling because she's the Angular DevRel and I'm the React DevRel, and I've had a couple easy years. The tides are a turning.
I will always like, it's like my husband, he's always like, Ember's great, and I'm like, honey, and he's like, no, Ember's kicking. I'm like, honey. So I think I'm gonna be, no matter where Angular goes in the future, I'm always gonna be that girl paddling down the Angular stream. Like, this is where everybody is, right? Like, I don't know, I love it here, it's great.
Like, not to make this, hopefully this isn't a sad point, but like, dark matter devs in these companies, like, people are still starting projects from scratch in Java. Like, nothing against Java, that's not meant to be an opinion, but like, there's just like a lot of room still for dev advocates for Angular and like anything that has mass enterprise adoption, which is React right now as well. There's still going to be a lot of support for that and hiring for that. So G2I, the company that I work for, I'll do like a JSON disclosure thing, hires React and React Native developers. We focus on this, right? And we've been like talking about in the new year, opening up to another framework or library to like bring developers on for a contract. And Angular is really pulling ahead internal discussion wise. And we've like discussed, like, is it a Web3 pivot? Do we go to Vue? Is it Svelte? And Angular just still keeps coming out on top of that conversation.
I think there's something that's kind of part of this process, right? React has had this like massive rise in popularity, and now we're in the era of blogs where people go, is React dying? 5 question marks. Click here to learn more. Like, but when that happens, I think it also kind of whittles down. And this is the era where I think there's opportunity for real community to happen, where people that are really passionate about it will kind of stick with it. And like, Alyssa was talking about always paddling in the Angular stream. I think there's always going to be folks that paddle in the React ocean.
Listen, we still support, and we proudly still support jQuery developers. I'm just saying.
No, and I mean that in like a positive way. Like, sometimes the hype wears off and it leaves behind a community of people who are really passionate and really excited to push something a little bit further, even once the big hurrah has died down. And personally, I'm a little bit excited for that era for React.
This is something that I think is really interesting, is in the Vue community, they managed to like skip most of the hype cycle and just go to the healthy community that builds things. And it's really interesting because when I drop into the Vue community, they're like, oh yeah, this is what we do in production. Here are our established patterns. Here are all the things that have been lifted out of Vue and ported to every other framework. And we just never, ever hear about them. They're just very happily and functionally making great stuff.
I'm cracking up a little bit at this chat. This is the question is, which framework does GitHub Copilot prefer? I guess that's where we're going next.
Yeah, who's got the AI hot takes?
Right, Source is the overlord. Oh man, you can't get me started on AI hot takes. That's a whole nother stream.
Isn't React one of the last frameworks that started pre-ES 2015 in the modules and modern JavaScript in the way we like, and you can still feel some of the, I don't want to say like the remnants of pre-ES 2015 still in the React ecosystem because of that. And I think there's an opportunity here for like Svelte and Solid to really like take off, like you said, Jason, like where they're not tied to like old patterns that we used to need to do because JavaScript hadn't matured properly.
I mean, I think a lot of the reason we didn't stop using jQuery as a default because jQuery is not a great tool. We stopped using jQuery because the ecosystem caught up and like browsers offered a lot of the things that jQuery was built to solve. And I think that led to us making different default decisions based on the things that were available to us. And I think we can see that through just about every major trend in web dev. We picked a thing because it made something easier. The ecosystem evolved. The thing that was made easier was now easy everywhere, so we can make a different set of decisions. I kind of think we're hitting that life cycle with React. It smoothed over a ton of really complicated stuff with VDOM and components and rendering, and now just about every framework has a great solution for all of those things, and they don't have all of the geological buildup, if you want to call it that, of having gone through lots of iterations over the last 7 years.
Yeah, I think we're also starting to experience an inversion in the way we think about building things, where server-side things are becoming more important in a way that was sort of inaccessible a few years ago. And I feel like everyone was building, well, you go way back, everyone was spending their whole day trying to figure out what CSS class they accidentally added to the wrong part of the DOM. But, you know, eventually we started doing this like stateful applications that were single page apps, and that got a little more mature. And now we realized that that kind of has bad implications for SEO, right? You generate one big page, it's hard for Google to index that. And, you know, our friends over at Google and down the hall from Alyssa figured that out eventually and started to get better at that. But we also, I should also say I used to work for Google too, so I should maybe disclose that. But we also now are starting to feel like we can build React applications, JavaScript applications that take advantage of server-side stuff and let the server do things that servers should, let the edge of the network do things that the edge of the network should. And to me, it feels like that's going to give us the opportunity to build applications that are more the way people expect them to if they're used to using like native apps. So your app will hydrate itself in a way that's predictable or smarter or instant. You get better loading states and things like that. And in a lot of ways, for me, that's the difference between an application that you notice is running, or you notice is loading, or you notice is taking a lot of time to transition between states, and an application that you don't notice and you just grow your attachment to the product and the service behind it. And it's sort of a weird facet of like, at some point, hopefully the software gets good enough that no one notices that, you know, the 8 of us on this stream and all of the other millions of developers in the world are doing our jobs. They're just attaching themselves to the product and growing some value, getting value out of what it is they're using. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that. And like, that's, you know, a Valhalla that we may never actually get to, but it's something that's feeling a lot more exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, right, that's what they say, like good design is invisible, right? Like ideally you don't even notice, and it just becomes something really inherent. And actually I'm gonna do a transition and we'll see if it works. But it made me think of something that actually I saw Michelle post on her Twitter, I think the other week, as you were talking about some of what you got in terms of the proposals for React Miami, how many of those were accessibility focused and how much that has shifted to, again, here's the transition part, become something that's so natural that we don't, it's not its own thing anymore. And it's not like there's one accessibility paper and someone's up there, you know, shaking fist at the sky trying to convince everyone to get on board. It's becoming something that's really inherent. And if it's not something that multiple people are submitting talks on, it's a part of other talks that's just getting naturally integrated into the way that we approach problems in JavaScript. And I thought that was really, really cool to see. I really enjoyed your thread about that, Michelle. Like,
yeah, it's one of those ones that I want to be careful of, just because so many talks at React Miami were submitted about accessibility, and it's really awesome to see, of course, everything you just said. And then there were a handful of talks that had accessibility as like a high priority point of the talk, even if it wasn't like the crux of the topic. But it is also something that, like I just say, I want to be careful of, because it could be one of these like bubble things of the Twitter sphere. Because I do have a very specific memory of like when I started doing I was doing web development for a couple of years, the big company, before we finally got our first designer, like first ever like UX. And I just happened to join my team. And one of the first questions he asked me was like, what accessibility standard are you going by when you're building out this application? And it was this massively important application. It was for an energy company. So a massively important application. We were already like 60% of the way through it. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, because also, again, for context, like junior dev, but I got switched from like, I got hired as a Java developer, had to learn React on the job. So all of this was brand new. And then he's like, what's your accessibility standard? I was like, I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. And this was just like a couple of years ago. And so like, I know again that there are so many companies that are not like thinking about this at all. What is on the other hand, not the answer, but a good thing that I've seen is that a lot of component libraries are building accessibility in by default. So that is like very good and nice. It's not all of the work that needs to be done, but it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, there's so many accessibility talks for React Miami, definitely the overwhelming topic, but I don't want this to be like work done, problem solved. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it is an ever and will always be an ever evolving target. So it's just something I think that is, as we grow as developers, as our community grows, as our language grows, it's going to be something I hope stays as a high priority category for us, because it's amazing as I've like started to care more and more and look into it, just how much it does change and just how many new things are brought to, you know, the forefront. So I don't know, I love that, Michelle. I need to find that thread. We need to link to it.
There's a little slander happening.
Oh my gosh.
Don't worry, Michelle. My mom thinks that Java and JavaScript are the same thing. So I mean, it's, you know.
So do
my
half the
mother.
recruiters out there. So
Oh, right.
Yeah. There's absolutely a point at which you just stop trying to explain to your in-laws what you do. And crossing from front-end engineer into developer advocate was that point for me. What do you do? Software engineer.
Yeah, I
Don't
think
ask.
even Elon Musk thinks that.
I like this comment a lot. It says recommend contributing to one of those component libraries if you want to learn about accessibility. Working on Chakra was incredibly eye-opening. And yeah, there is nothing like putting the work in and implementing it that will learn you up quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. I think Google did us a big favor a few years ago by starting to add accessibility into SEO ranking. At some point, Lighthouse scores started to take accessibility stuff into account. I think that was like 2019-ish. And we all had to learn in a hurry. And like, it's a shame that the industry got to the point where we had to be told to go learn these things. But that's also going to elevate the type of work we
That's
do.
what it
And,
took.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
We all say we don't like metrics, but boy, will we do anything to make the metrics happy.
That's right.
I love a good Lighthouse score.
Gotta keep the
Watch
robots happy in
numbers
the end.
go up or down depending on which way they're supposed to go.
But I think it's really good too that a lot of component libraries are starting to incorporate accessibility in it, because I find that when you want a group of people to do something, like telling people one by one, like this is important, or the fishing, it doesn't work. So when you force them by like making it so easy for them not to do it, or you incorporate things by default, that's when you start to get these waves of people that are just using it. This is just part of the developer experience. If you're going to use this library, you're going to get accessibility too, and you're going to be like, you're going to have that great Lighthouse score as well. Just put things in by default if that's what you want.
Well, and just on the education part, some of these libraries are starting to add that in the documentation. This is how the accessibility works. Here's how the keyboard works. And you're finding out, oh, I didn't even know the tabs were supposed to have this kind of a keyboard kind of a thing, because it's in a WCAG kind of thing. And it's like reading a stereo manual, trying to understand what the WCAG like requirements are for a tabs component.
Well, and I love that you brought that up, because I do see more and more like Angular trying to teach like this is accessibility in Angular, like, and this is what accessibility means. And same with like our framework, like Kendo UI, of like I don't know, it is kind of the responsibility of whatever tool or language it is to also like teach their community individually about it, of like, hey, this thing right here, this is part of, you know, this spec and we care about it, right? So I love seeing that more and more. I'm excited for prediction. We'll see more of that in this year.
That was a smooth transition. I see what you're doing. I see. I'm picking up what you're putting down, which is that it's 7:53 and we should start wrapping things up.
Yes. With any closing comments on the past survey, predictions of the future, maybe just
I want to hear a prediction from everyone
Oh.
for 2023.
She always
I
does
always-
this, and I apologize. I apologize. She's very feisty. I can't control her.
I have a prediction, actually. You made me think of that. We were talking about UI libraries. I think a lot of our tools, like UI libraries, are going to have to change to adapt to more stuff moving to the server. And for example, a lot of current UI libraries rely, for React at least, they rely on hooks. But those are things that won't work with React server components. Correct me if I'm getting that wrong, but if we want those components to be server rendered and not hydrated on the client, while also keeping some interactivity, we might have to actually jump out of React and use like pure JavaScript solutions. That's something that Astro supports. And I'm not sure what the solution will be, but I think we'll reconsider a lot of the things that seemed very natural up to now because of that new dimension of, oh, actually, I don't want that component to be rehydrated and re-executed on the client.
I think mine kind of aligns, Sasha, with your prediction, but mine is that those, I think we called them rendering libraries or rendering tools. I think those will become more popular, like the stripping out of JavaScript by default will be big. And then also a lot of the frameworks will be leaning more towards being JavaScript framework agnostic. It'll just be like straight up JavaScript, like not you have to use React to use this. It's just, if you use JavaScript, whatever flavor of it, Angular, Vue, you can use this tool along with that.
I guess I'll give my prediction for next year. I think all of our jobs are going to be impacted way more by Rust than they were this year, and Rust is already making massive changes to our lives.
Interesting.
I think 2023 will be the year that something TypeScript related will be adopted, be seriously considered by ECMAScript.
That was shockingly close to my prediction, which is why I made that like face, because I was like, no, my prediction. But my prediction is that I think this is the year we stop writing vanilla JavaScript. But maybe that won't be the case if JavaScript just includes it the way we've watched CSS just like chomp everything Sass was doing. So, but otherwise, I think that the shift that we've seen towards TypeScript has been strong and opinionated, and the era of writing plain old JS is leaving.
I had a TypeScript prediction too, so now I'm like, my pick because that seems like
the cool people.
I noticed in the survey, I think that like I think it was like 20 kick Mark out with her, get out of here. Like it was like I think 20%. I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but I think like 20% of people are like 100% in on TypeScript, and I think that
like I know what you're talking about. Actually,
wait, what? 20. Okay.
It sounded, the way you said it made it sound like 60% of the time.
60% of the time.
I know exactly what you meant.
But it was really interesting. Like there's like 20% of people, like 1 out of 5 developers in the survey are like, I am only writing in TypeScript, like exclusively.
I don't understand who's not. Who's not writing in TypeScript? Oh, you're not?
I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah. It's me.
Shanda's got a chorus that's coming out for you.
I genuinely need it. I feel like every resolution is
like just because TypeScript was really popular one. I would say that this year is also going to be the year of the docs. Docs are going to be so good, and I don't think you're going to be able to ship something without good docs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I'm listening. I'm trying desperately to find that TypeScript question. There it is. I found it. Just so that neither of us look like we've gone off the deep end.
Where's the 20% of 100%? What's the what now?
So yeah.
How do you read things?
See, here it is. 20% of 100% of people, or no, 20% of people write 100% of TypeScript.
Oh,
you're not.
my God.
You're right.
I'm writing vanilla with no build step.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that there's not that many people in the middle, right? Like once you adopt TypeScript, you kind of want to write everything in TypeScript. It
Yeah,
feels,
no, you can't
Yeah.
go back. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
I keep dabbling, and I haven't ever had a project that's forced me to learn it at a deep enough level
Yep.
that I've properly
that's-
adopted it.
That is it. Forced. You have to be shoved off that cliff because we're JavaScripters, right? Like, I don't want your
I'm one of
.NET
the
bits all up
people-
in here. Right?
You
I'm one
are
of the people in the
literally-
middle here, where I write TypeScript sometimes and I write JavaScript
sometimes.
most of the time.
Because you hate yourself?
Because I'm like one of the TypeScript heretics where I actually don't think TypeScript is that useful for anything except autocomplete. Like TypeScript autocomplete is the only reason I care about TypeScript at all. And because of that, I will write TypeScript whenever the thing I'm writing is going to be imported somewhere. And I want it because I want the autocomplete. But I feel like I can see Shonda is like ready to jump through the screen.
She's
thought I
holding
knew you.
herself back,
So hurt.
working on the desk.
Thought we were friends. All right, cool. Go ahead, Jason.
That's I
I was
mean,
with
really,
you this whole thing.
my goal was to make sure that we ended this stream with you mad at me. That was
You did it. You did it.
A friendship ends right here live, everybody.
You've seen it first.
No,
Surprisingly-
Oh,
no,
B
go
and
ahead.
mine was just saying they'll have to be pushed. I was pushed, and I'm glad I was pushed. But now I'm a little worried because Jason's. I kind of
Isn't
bought into them.
Angular- Didn't Angular jump onto the TypeScript train way earlier?
Yeah, and it wasn't
Mhm.
like if you want to. It was like here it is, and you were like why? But no,
That was like my only experience was when I was working in a company
Angular.
that
Yeah.
did Angular, and then I went back to React, and I was like, haha, back to ignorance. Like,
I
If
really-
you write a
putting my
new
head back
component
under the rock.
library,
and
if
this
you're
is what
writing a
happened.
component library, there's no way you can get away with not having it in
not
TypeScript
having
anymore.
it. Yeah.
don't
that
have
I
to
agree
write it
with. Like I
anymore.
would
I just
never
have
write
to-
a
I
package
just have to
for
advocate
public
for it
consumption.
now.
Next season on Code It Live. Yeah, we do need to have a TypeScript showdown for sure. Are there any more did we miss? Did everybody get? I'm trying to go down the list in my mind on predictions. Did everybody get one? No,
Did anybody
maybe.
have a prediction? I don't think so.
What was yours, Alyssa?
Oh, for I really come from a hard Angular perspective, but I really agree with it's kind of like a twist on what Shonda was saying about the rendering bits, but even more so, Angular is moving towards being able to do things like hydration, and I think the community is gonna just more and more like look into things like SSR, and I'm excited to see it and do it myself. So it is time. So.
I had some. I had some really good conversations with Jessica Janik on the Angular core team, and
Yes.
I'm very fortunate to be friends with Sarah Drasner, who is I think Jessica's skip or great grand skip or something like that. And sometimes I get like just tiny little snippets of the plan for Angular, and I'm just like, ooh, Angular's coming back. Angular's gonna make a play for the crown. Like, I'm ready. I'm ready. for this.
2023 prediction: Angular skyrockets.
Angular. But that's
I mean, if I was
again
going to bet
always
on
my
literally
prediction.
anybody to move the JavaScript community, it's Sarah Drasner. So
Oh,
if she's
yeah.
pushing in a direction,
sure.
I'm looking in the direction she's pushing.
Yeah. I fangirled real hard at NGConf this year. I was like, "Hi, Sarah, hi." And I like ran
Well,
away. It was
How creepy.
And guess who wrote this year's conclusion, by the way?
was it Sarah?
Yeah.
Was it?
Maybe.
I'm squeaking
It was,
real
it was
hard.
a
I
great
apologize,
conclusion.
friends. Aw. JavaScript and TypeScript are more vibrant than ever. I'm really
Mhm.
shocked. I thought I guess I'm in this Angular bubble, Catherine. So I was like, yeah, and everybody writes TypeScript. So we got to talk, me and you. We should.
Are you
we
going to
should
teach
talk.
me?
No, I want to.
I know.
No. I want to hear your opinions. I'm like, maybe it's not the end all be all. I don't know. Like,
No, I don't think that my having not learned it is a reflection on the
okay.
language.
Okay,
I think it's a reflection on Kathryn.
I will say I am a little impressed that we got through an entire like JavaScript 2022 and 2023 conversation and nobody said the word resumability once.
I think you just
ruining
did.
our streak. No,
I did it. So whoever had that on your bingo card, there you go.
Well,
State of
nobody
JS
wants
shots.
to admit they don't know
Somebody's
what it
not as
means,
drunk as
so.
they could have been.
Oh man, you're right. We should totally make this a
Oh
drinking
my
game
gosh,
next time.
we need to make bingo cards. That's what I'm hearing. Oh my word. Well, I am just super, super humbled for everyone who came tonight or this morning, whatever time it is for you, to give us your time and your thoughts and your passion, not only for the stream, but I know that all of you are big members in the JavaScript community in one way or another. So thank you for everything you do for our communities. Yeah. And thank you, Sasha, for this survey. Another year, you did it. Woohoo!
Yay.
Yeah, I'm going to need a bit more pep in that step. A bit
No,
more.
that's all I got left in me. Sorry.
You're
It's
not
the
like
beginning of
Santa
the day
Claus
for you,
already
man.
preparing the
You gotta
next
step it
survey,
up.
right?
Yeah, actually, I am mentally, so that's the problem.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, JavaScript to just not come out with any new libraries or frameworks for 1 year. and I can take a break.
Right.
Honestly, I'm starting to get on board. I think you could sell me on that.
We need a truce.
Can we have a break? Can we take a year off?
2023, the year off, right? You know, where
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
changed.
Bad.
But then what if
just
people
peaceful.
actually like it and we realize, oh, actually, JavaScript is fine as it is. We
Where,
don't need to.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've arrived, right?
Yeah, and then we would just kill innovation forever. So we can't take that risk.
Fine.
The year we all move out to houses in the woods off the grid.
I don't know why you're knocking my dream, Kathryn.
You're ready to be a dark something.
Oh, a
Dark
dark matter
matter
dev.
dev.
It's so
You're ready
tempting.
to be a dark matter dev.
I could slither away into the woods in a heartbeat.
Not even a dev anymore, just a straight up homesteader.
There you go.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh,
You
God.
guys are so beautiful. Thank
This is
you
going
so
off
much.
the grid this year. You got a bunker ready.
I'm in, right? No, there's quite a few devs. I know. Actually, there was I think a talk at a conference about this. But I think it's just because we went too far in the other direction. All right. So everybody just calm down and
Yeah,
nobody
it's like
needs to
that.
go in the woods, right? Well,
It's like that trend where all the teenagers want flip phones now. Bonkers.
Mm-hmm. It's like, what's your favorite framework? Well, it's the one that I put above my tomatoes so the plant doesn't flop over.
It would be concrete.
It's good weatherproofing, lives long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you just argue about DeWalt versus Milwaukee versus Makita.
I got into that argument with some bros, and I
Which
did not
basil
know
are
what
you
I
growing?
walked into. Oh man.
So you're saying this is a mindset that we actually can't escape and will in fact bring to whatever we try to escape into.
Oh, is that what they're saying? I'm so glad you put that into words.
This is a problem with who we are as people.
Yes, it is fundamental. Yeah, it's deep in there. But honestly, I love it and I love this community. So thank you all for your time and for your opinions and thoughts. But go and be merry and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is for you. But yes, I think that is all. Be free, people.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, y'all.